Hello and welcome to this edition of Big Fish Small Pod. As always, here on Big Fish Small Pod, we like to give you these episodes in 10 minutes or less. And as always, here on Big Fish Small Pod, we are presented by MPT College Consulting. You can check them out at mptcollegeconsulting.com. And here we have a brand new guest, even new to the Miami Marlins media scene, Tyler Boronski. Tyler, it's great to have you on. Tell the people a little bit about yourself and maybe how it's been covering the Fish first couple days in spring.
Hey, Daniel, thanks so much for having me on. It's been good so far covering the Fish. Just recently relocated to South Florida after spending a lot of time in the Northeast. Was in the TV world for a while, working with networks like NESN, the home of the Red Sox. But now I'm freelancing and doing more digital work here in South Florida. So just started my Marlins media tenure, and it's gone well so far.
No, awesome. Obviously, with the Marlins going on, everything spring, new manager with Clayton McCullough, Sandy coming back. With you going into the Marlins world, what are your expectations for the Marlins this season? What are you trying to see for them this year, or maybe what they've done so far this off season? When you see the Fish, what kind of team do you see?
I think my expectations are similar to theirs right now. We know they aren't trying to win this year by any means, but I think the goal is to see, do you have any guys you can really build around? Like the big thing Peter Bendix has done is refurbish this farm system. I think 20 of the top 30 prospects for the Marlins right now are guys that he's brought in. So I think for them, it's just seeing, are there some guys we can actually build around? And then maybe who are really closer to our high-end guys? Because that is the one thing right now, you don't really see any like high-end, can't miss prospect for the Marlins, but do you have enough guys that you can build a core around? So I know Connor Norby was mentioned the other day in Peter and Bruce Sherman's press conference that Peter said, he sees all-star potential in Norby, which is high praise. So, I do think that's a little early to say since we've only played like half a season in big leagues, but that's the interesting part is like, who are some guys that can really stand out in camp? And a lot of guys will have chances to do so this season.
Yeah, and you've been there a couple times this spring. You've seen interviews with Derek Hill and players like that. But what have you seen so far this spring? Any player maybe come to your attention that you're watching? Maybe storylines you're following so far in this early part of spring?
Yeah, I think one guy to pay attention to is Max Meyer. This offseason, he's really added a sinker and a sweeper to his repertoire. And this is kind of a make or break year for him. Obviously came up a few years ago, top prospect. You could argue maybe came up a little too early, and then obviously injuries these last couple of years. So I think this is a really big year for him because obviously he's still just 25, but we've kind of gone through the gauntlet with him. So he's one name to look out for that I would pay attention to.
Yeah, just everything with Max Meyer, see if he could solidify his spot in that starting rotation. There's always been talks of, hey, Max can be maybe a top-end reliever, but you mentioned with his new pitch repertoire, maybe he's trying to establish himself in that starting rotation. And maybe let's go a little bit on that rotation. We mentioned Max Meyer. How do you expect guys like Sandy coming back now full-time, playing, mentioning opening day starter, Yuri coming back probably midway through the season, and it just maybe a lot of question marks within that rotation. They just signed Cal Quantrill, who had a pretty average, decent season with Colorado. Just you always have to look at the course field factor there. But what are your maybe thoughts on this rotation and maybe how you're even seeing it this spring over there up there in Jupiter?
Yeah, I mean, I think the rotation could be one of the strengths for this team. Obviously, like you said, there are some question marks, but the talent is pretty strong across the board. You just have a lot of people like Max Meyer or like Cabrera, that what are we going to get from them? Because obviously someone like Cabrera has like been super inconsistent throughout his career. So, but I mean, Sandy's looked really good so far. Like I got to see his first live like throwing to hitters since the Tommy John last week. Looked really smooth, was throwing all his pitches. Obviously, the expectation is like how much he's going to build his trade value before the trade deadline. But I think, they'll get a good first half from him. So I think the potential for that is there. It's just like, will we see it? But I think that is one of their strong suits for this team.
Yeah. And, you mentioned Peter, you mentioned Bruce. You've had time to, they had press conferences, Bruce, Peter, and Clayton. What did you hear from maybe those three interviews? Peter and Bruce were a lot of questions about, hey, are they going to be sellers already in the beginning of the season? What's up with Sandy? Why are not signing a majority of free agents? Why is the only major league for a free agent you signed just a couple weeks ago? Clayton, a lot of talk with Sandy, pitching, hitting. Just what did you hear from those three guys in their separate press conferences?
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny with Peter the other day, like obviously hyping up Sandy so much, and it's just like the undertone there is that, which I don't blame him by any means. It's just like you're selling like how great he looks right now to other teams. So that was really my takeaway when I heard that. Obviously, Bruce is also funny. Hearing him talk about like they've made the most amount of trades or something like that. He said, I was like, well, yeah, because you guys have traded away like all your guys lately.
Yeah.
But I think I've dealt with Clayton more. And Clayton seems like the good thing about Clayton, he seems very patient, which is what you need for this group. Obviously, like I'm sure you've been around him too. It's just like he's a really like a stand-up guy. Obviously knows winning. Really good when it comes to base running, and obviously has the experience even early in his time with the Dodgers, like in minor league baseball and developing guys. So that's what you need for this type of group. So obviously Bruce the other day also said like Clayton gave like the best inspirational first base speech he's heard from any since he's been an owner, which I also thought was kind of funny. I didn't get to hear much of that, but I think so far, Clayton seems to be a good fit for this group, and especially for this period in the organization. So.
Yeah, and right now we've been mentioning a lot about the pitching, and that's always a strength for the Marlins. Whether it's down in the farm or up in the majors, you can always rely on Marlins pitching to at least develop fairly well and produce for the fish. But hitting wise, what have you seen also up there in Jupiter? I know you talked to Matt Mervis for a bit, newly acquired Marlin. Just who are some guys that you're looking at also this Jupiter, and maybe some guys that may be surprise fans this coming season?
Yeah, there's just so many wild cards with this team, and so many guys that will get a chance to prove their worth. Mervis is a good example. Obviously, someone that had a historic minor league season 3 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago with the Cubs. Injuries and just inconsistencies over there kind of led to him coming over here to the Marlins. But he'll get a chance at first base. Another guy, De Los Santos, is definitely a big wild card. They traded Jake Berger to kind of open things up to maybe give him a chance, and obviously his ceiling can be very high. He just needs to cut back on those strikeout numbers because obviously definitely a big gap there. But those are two names. I mean, Ramirez, the catcher, and kind of just seeing, okay, can he actually stay as a catcher, or is he going to become this DH / first base platoon? Like, is he strong enough defensively to be there? So it's just this whole team, literally, like there's no like real like set guy for the most part. I mean, Fortes is like the main starter at catcher, but just like everyone's got a chance to fight for a spot and fight for playing time, and that's across the board really, and that's what kind of makes this group a little interesting from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's just so many variables. On this team, you have guys like Jesus Sanchez, who may be the only really position player that really has some type of role longevity there with the Marlins this season, and it seems like everyone is fighting for a spot. Xavier Edwards, is he a shortstop? Is he a second baseman? First base, it's really a battle between 3 guys, maybe even 4 guys for that spot. Catcher, it's Nick Fortes, and that's maybe who's going to be the backup, who's going to step up. Is it a Liam Hicks? Yeah. Is Rob Brantley going to come up and play for the Fish again for the first time in close to like 10 years or so? Yeah. So it's a lot of different really variables and different kind of things coming out for the Marlins. But Tyler, just the last question I want to give you. Just what do you hope to see from the Marlins maybe this spring and this season? If there's one success, if the season ended, what's one successful thing that has to go right for the Marlins? What you think is the most crucial thing that the Marlins need to do to have a successful season?
Like get a few guys that can prove that they're actually like regular big league players. Like I said, we haven't either been able to see it in a full sample size with guys like Connor Norby, or they've just been inconsistent throughout their careers. Like we just talked about, like Jesus Sanchez is a good example too. He's had a wild card career so far.
Yeah.
So it's just like having enough guys prove that like they can actually be like real big leaguers to build a potential core around and go from there. Because there's just so much what ifs with this team, and that's what would be honestly successful. Is that some of these guys that like Peter Bendix brought in from trades, they develop, and like I said, some of them can contribute to the big league team eventually.
Yeah, could have said it better myself. Tyler, I want to really appreciate you coming on, on such short notice. Even just dipping your feet in the wild ride that is Marlins media. Tell the people where they could find you, if they could find some of your writings, your interviews, everything you do.
Yeah, if you just type my name, Tyler Boronski, TYLER on all platforms, you'll find different interviews I'm doing with players. I'm making these like behind the scenes vlogs, some long form for YouTube, some shorter form for TikTok. I try to produce something every time I'm at camp. I was editing one today that I'm hoping to post tomorrow on YouTube. So, and it's kind of fun to just like feature the guys in different ways too in those videos. So that's where you can find me and see my work.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it as always here on Big Fish Small Pod. Go Fish.